as we've discussed over the last few sessions that we got together, we specifically talked about, you know, African history and, well, shall we say, the suppressed history of Africa. Now, what I would specifically want to get into are you know, the certain, well, should we say, bits of knowledge, the theories, the philosophies, you know, that you've come across in your research. You know, obviously, you yourself being a not just an investigative researcher, but also an avid supporter of the Black history, you know, of Africa. So tell us a little bit more about what you've come across in terms of African history.
Well, before we even get to answering that question, you've got to look at the kind of period of time of what we're trying to look at, because when you look around, if you look back at history as in the forefathers of philosophy, known as people like Socrates and Plato, well, there's evidence to prove that they weren't. They'll say they had to learn their knowledge from somewhere, and there's a theory that they spent up to 15 years studying in Egypt, which is obviously in Africa. So quickly you get an understanding of how the credit of the beginning of, you know, anything from music to communication, language, philosophy, astronomy, the forefathers of this information is a hard thing to get down to. So a lot of research seems to just jump a lot of stages. So in terms of answering your question, you've got to kind of look at what period of time. Looking at it from a sense of not so much the people, and looking at more of a sense of information in general. Information about color formations, information about music, philosophy, astronomy. Okay, all of these topical things. The forefathers of this information. In this society, world we live in, system we live in, we're told that the forefathers of this are of European origin. And as we've gone through the, say, 17th, 18th, 19th to now, this century, 21st century, they are all of a sudden finding out information that disproves that the Europeans were the forefathers of a lot of this information. And you tend to see that there's a purpose behind it all, and the purpose all along was to suppress the origins of man, knowledge in general, to kind of slow down progression, basically. So this whole sense of evolution is, you know, is not just a myth, but it doesn't fit in very well. If you look at our progression, we haven't progressed as far as we're led to believe.
Let's talk a little bit more about Africa and Atlantis, or shall I say rather, the connection between the two. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you were asking me that. I don't think we've tried to discuss it. It's one of those where the information about Atlantis is there. The information about the origins of Africa are there as well, but the vital parts of information to connect the two, or even find common understanding about either of them, it's absolutely ruined. It's in pieces at the moment, and for people to actually understand how essential the many African, not so much empires were, dynasties were, they need to have a common understanding somewhere. And until, you know, people accept, for example, that Europe, when Europe started to really develop, the Ethiopian Empire was in their 18th dynasty. So I don't know how long each dynasty was, but even if each of them was a year, it still shows some advancement, but obviously they weren't that short. You know, you're talking hundreds and hundreds of years, maybe thousands, where Africa was a lot more developed than the rest of the world. And we're not just talking Egypt, we're talking right through Nigeria, Ethiopia, Ghana, and as far down as Zimbabwe and South Africa. And, you know, the kind of importance of those origins are, they're being scratched so surfacely that it's very hard for people to understand what's going on. Like, for example, the origins of Egypt. We've spoken about how Egypt is in the Middle East, and I was trying to say Egypt's in the landmass of Africa. You know what I mean? The whole common understanding, even between us, is kind of a bit shady on the even geographics of Egypt. I think that the suppression, as we were starting off, the suppression of not just the people of Africa, but the whole culture, knowledge, whole spiritual being has been severely suppressed to the extent where the accreditation or understanding of geographically what Africa is keeps changing. It constantly keeps changing. The size of it keeps changing on a lot of atlases. I know it sounds stupid, but yes, they do that. Everyone knows that they make Britain slightly bigger than it actually is, and you know, not all of the time, but it does get played with a lot. But there is ways of making Africa smaller or taking away different regions, for example, and it's been done for thousands of years, because even the Greeks, when they first started coming into Africa, they thought Libya, the region of Libya was Africa. That was it, because they haven't discovered the rest of it. So their understanding of what the size of Africa was misunderstood very early when they were started to name things very very early on, which I don't know. I think that's the start of where the human language started to fall apart, where people started to name things a lot quicker than was necessary. But yeah, there's been a lot of other cultures which have come into Africa and not understood the size of the landmass for thousands of years. And in this common day and age, politics has got involved, where wars divide countries and religions kind of cultivate and form regions in that way. So because I guess the Islamic Empire is central in the Middle East, as an empire they want to, claim more landmass. So sometimes places, as you mentioned, Lebanon, Egypt, even places like Libya are claimed as the Middle East. And essentially, if you're going to talk about even the origins of people and where it actually is, as in cutting it out, Africa is one size. It looks like a Rasta man's head. That is Africa. Everything within that region is Africa. It should be quite easy to understand. Just the way that Britain should be, Scotland, Wales, the whole of Ireland, either that should be Britain, or you give Ireland all of Ireland. Why split up Northern Ireland and Ireland? Politics and religion and all sorts of misunderstandings have split that up. The same way you've got North Korea and South Korea. One country is split up to a complete divide. You've had East and West Germany. You've got East Timor and Indonesia. You've got landmasses which are split for purely political and religious reasons, which, when people begin to get a greater awareness, they see how unnecessary all of this is. Claiming of landmass is obviously a crazy thing anyway, but if you go to the extent of claiming landmass for political and religious reasons to manipulate and suppress people, you kind of give generations and generations of really bad punishment, which you'll see in a lot of young youth today. They haven't really they don't identify themselves. They don't really know themselves.
Disassociation.
That's the word I was looking for. Disassociation.